Several episodes back, we featured a book called The Power of Habit.
Its premise being that successful lives
point right back to intentional habits.
Built on one simple platform.
Cue, routine, reward.
This week, we're returning to the habit theme.
But this time with a design focus for business.
How do you create products that wow customers the first time?
And bring them back after the initial excitement wears off.
This book features a simple process to hook customers.
And it adds one key component to that cue, routine, reward pattern.
Investment.
So let's dive right into Hooked, how to build habit-forming products. Welcome back. You're listening to Motivation Minute, where we unravel the timeless truths in that stack of books you've been wanting to read so that you don't have to. And this week's book is Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products by Eyal. And, you know, Jiraiya, this is one of those books that I put down. I was like, this is the key. Like, this is how you keep people coming back. And that's one of the biggest things, I think, in business, to keep people returning, because they love downloading your app or your product the first time. But then that wears off and it's kind of over, and you have to do everything you can with like reminders and emails to bring them back. And that's part of the toughest part of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's sometimes easy to get people interested the first time because it's new and flashy, but how do you actually keep them coming back? Because that's the biggest problem, is things get old and they wear out and people aren't interested anymore. But you know, the lifetime value of a customer is like one of the most important things, not the first time. It's the lifetime value. So how do you keep them coming back? And this reminded me a lot of the book we read, The Power of Habit. It has some of the same ideas on what causes us to form habits.
Yeah, and a lot of it was tech examples in the book. And what it revolved around was, you want to be the first to mind solution for people's problems to win. And it brought up, like, obviously Google is what you think of when you search Facebook for social media,
mm-hmm.
and Twitter for news. Like, who thinks of Bing for searching? You don't ever tell people to Bing stuff or DuckDuckGo it. I mean, there are very small groups of people that would actually do that. But
cult
followings. The vast majority of us are like, give me Google.
Exactly, yeah. And it's weird how they've created their company name as it's now a verb. It's like, it's crazy how that's a habit.
It's a verb and a noun. Is it an adjective? Well, I don't think it's an adjective.
But basically, they've created us to think of their company or product as the natural, obvious thing to do for that when you're trying to fill that specific need.
And there's a way to do that, which this book brings up, and it's a 4-step cycle. So what's the first step?
Well, it has like a sequence: the trigger, action, reward, and investment, right?
Right. And there's an interesting thing about that, because the first trigger is external. It's like you're prompted by something to do that thing. So in apps, you see an app that says download me. That's the external trigger. But then after you do the investment, the last piece, you repeat the cycle and you go back to trigger. But this time it's an internal trigger, ideally. Because if you can make it so that the person thinks of the trigger versus you thinking of it for them, they will more likely repeat the cycle and just keep spiraling in it.
Yeah, it comes back. I keep coming back to this thing I've been on recently about conscious versus unconscious. It's how, how to get someone to do something naturally without you having to put in action to make them do it. You want them to do it unconsciously without them realizing. And it's not like that's kind of how manipulation works, but it's just, we all do this. It's at 40% of what we do every day is purely through habit. So we all have these things that we do unconsciously. We don't realize that we're doing them. We forget that we do them. One thing for me has been the time I get up every day. I just naturally will get up at a certain time every day because that's how I've always been doing it, which happens to be late right now. But and then a year later, I'm like, wow, I've been getting up late every single day for the last year, and I haven't even realized it. Or just different things that, yeah. So how do we get people to go from consciously doing an action to unconsciously doing it?
A lot of it is framing how the product is seen by the customer, and that determines the quality of the habit they can develop around it.
Mm.
Like the book said, the quality of your habit is proportional to how frequently people use your product and what they see as the perceived utility or usefulness or value in it. It gave this graph that was really cool in the book of running on your horizontal x-axis, you have the perceived utility, and on the y-axis, you have the frequency of using it. And the concept is the things you use more frequently and with greater utility, which that is your habit zone. And that's where you want your product to be. If you have low frequency, they use it, low utility, that's not where you want to be.
But some things have a high utility while they're very, very useful, very practical, but people don't want to use them because they're too complicated, or there's like, and that's the problem with business owners, is they'll make a product that's very, very useful and has a lot of utility, but then they don't know how to get people to actually use it because it's for whatever reason, and that's the hard thing to get over, is how do you get people to use it? Because everybody wants to use the easy thing from some big company, or because the big companies figured that out. But how do you, for your small business, figure out how to get them to use your product instead?
It's kind of like a year ago, Apple came out with the shortcuts for Siri on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically a way to drag and drop program where you can say, like, I have it set up where I say going home, and it gives me how long it'll take to get home and sends a text to people I care about when I'm getting home. And
no way.
It's pretty cool that it does that for me.
You would do that. And I knew about that, and I was like, wow, this is so cool, but then I never used it.
But the funny thing about how they did this is it's drag and drop. So it's more likely for people to use it if it's drag and drop.
Right.
But I'm a software engineer, so I was already digging into where can I custom script stuff within this. And it turns out they give you access to do some custom scripting that gives you more power. But for the ease of use, it's a whole lot easier than writing my own thing, which is why the majority of people would not do this.
Right. Well, even just setting up the shortcuts in the app, it's super simple. You just drag and drop. Okay, when I say this thing in Siri, it sends a text to these people, and then blah blah. Sets up a calendar, date, whatever. It's still almost too much, I think, for the average person to plan ahead. At least for me, I think that's example. I haven't heard of anybody else using it. Like all my friends, everybody uses smartphones, and I haven't heard anybody use it. You're the only person, actually.
I also made something very complicated with it that has extremely good use for me.
Yeah.
Like the simple stuff, like to tell Siri going home and just get the weather, or like what's the weather, and she gives you the weather. Like she already does that. You could make simple things and she does it, but you have to make it complicated to make it worth it.
Mm-hmm. So
at least in my opinion, my humble opinion.
It does, but you have to have a balance, like you were saying. But anyway, what causes us to do certain things to start with? That's the trigger, right?
Yes. So the trigger gets us moving in the direction of the habit. Yes.
And that's that can be caused by when we're in a certain environment, or certain things we see remind us of something, or when we're in a certain emotional state. And we don't. This is the scary thing, is we don't even realize it. Okay, every time I come home in the evening, maybe I'm feeling a little stressed. So first thing I do is I always check Snapchat when I'm stressed or something.
Uh-huh.
And we don't realize that's the reason we're checking Snapchat. It's because whatever this feeling we had first, all these negative. If you're feeling lonely, if you're fearful or depressed, that causes you to do these little habits.
Yes, let's camp there for a second. It was about negative emotion, because like you can be triggered positively, which there are great examples to be triggered positively, like where let's say you want to make a really nice meal and you find a great recipe to do it. Well, that's a positive trigger. A negative trigger is like you said with Snapchat, where you're stressed, or the book said like Instagram, fear of missing out. That was a big deal for me. I quit Instagram because I always had that fear of missing out. I didn't really quit. I check once every like week or two on weekends on my computer only. I just disabled it on my phone so that it would be very hard to get to. But see, the thing is with that, like the negative emotion is what keeps you coming back.
Yeah, exactly. And then it goes to the action. So the trigger causes you to do an action. And we just kind of talked about this already, but it has to be an action that has a balance between ease of use and practicality. So it's like, and then to do an action takes motivation and ability and a trigger, which we talked about. Well, you first get the trigger, then you have to have the motivation, which the trigger causes. The trigger, whatever, gives you feel depressed, so you have the motivation to see what your friends are doing to make you happy. And then it has to be the ability. It has to be something that's not too hard to do, or we just wouldn't do it.
So what's interesting about that action piece is you can motivate people, but it's hard to change people's existing motivation generally. Like you're only motivated as far as you are, unless you get into unless you're like in a seminar with all these people that are all motivated like you. It gets you super hyped. Like that's a way to change your motivation. But on an average day, how much does your motivation swing? Not that much.
No, not much at all.
And the book was saying that the way to change that is if you can add scarcity and a progress bar. So, okay, what does that mean? So scarcity, that would be making it so that you have to act now versus later. That would make you more motivated to act.
Right.
And then the progress bar concept is you see the progress you're making. Like if you're motivated to do something and you don't see any progress on what you're doing, hey, that's not going to help. But if you do see progress, that will.
The scarcity is huge, yeah. When you see deals like, sale, that's exactly what a sale is. It's like we have this thing at a low price temporarily. It's like if you don't buy it today, you won't get the good deal. And so that's huge. And yeah, so about how to get motivated, how to get people to be motivated to do something is almost impossible. But you can if you have a reward. So that's the third piece was the reward. What's the reward that you're getting? You wouldn't think that there's this huge reward of using Facebook or Instagram or different products that we use, but there is a big reward in our brain, like psychologically. Like there's a part of our brain that becomes active whenever we crave something, or it releases dopamine in your brain, makes you feel good. And the thing is, it's not even conscious. It's like it's like when you're having great conversations with friends, you're hanging out with friends, you're just having a really good time. What your brain is doing is releasing dopamine in your brain to make you feel good, and that's why. And that happens naturally. That's totally good. When you're with people and socializing, that's how you get hooked on something. Is that reward, something that causes that reward in your brain.
So I got a good example to kind of sum up the action and reward piece. So I'm studying for a certification right now, which is extremely boring to do. Okay. I'm reading through, I have this giant 10-page document of acronyms I have to memorize with all this information out of context for a technical security certification. So I had to set up some things to keep me motivated. And one was the scarcity of the action. I'm giving myself a tight time frame to study for the test, which is 2 weeks before I come to visit you, which is the reward. And then the progress bar for me is I am taking these quizzes in the book that help me stay motivated on an ongoing basis as I'm learning, because otherwise I'd get very tired quickly. And then the reward is obviously at the end. I get the certification, and then I take off and have fun for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
So
wow,
that's kind of a way you can keep it flowing.
You're intentionally putting all those things in place. Wow, that's amazing. And the thing is, most of the time, those things are not intentional. They're put in front of us by companies and corporations that put all these things in place without us realizing, that make us get hooked on their products. Yeah, like I realize I always do things not always, but so a lot of times I'll wait till the last minute to get it done, and then I always get it done right before the deadline, which is really bad. And it's because of that scarcity thing. I have to get it done now. It's like if I don't have to get it done now, then I can just wait and not do it.
The other thing that'll make you want to get something done is if you sunk a lot of your time into it, and that's the investment piece of this cycle. That's a new one that we haven't talked about yet. I'm pretty sure on most of the episodes. And what's interesting is the investment piece is the time and monetary value you've sunk into a service, basically. And what that means is like the content that you have there, the followers you have there that you don't want to give up, the reputation you have, the skill you have, all those things.
Yeah. If you can have something that gets more valuable over time, the more someone uses it, that's huge. So basically over time, you start using one software, like I use Dropbox. Pretty soon I have all these files on Dropbox, and it would be
everything in Dropbox.
Be a huge pain to try to move it to some other system. So now the value is higher for them, and it's worth it to me to pay their large monthly fee.
Yeah. And like for me, photos, I have photos I got to manage, and I have an iPhone. I've looked at other options. I could do Amazon Photos. I could do, Flickr. I could do other online storage, Google Drive, but it's so convenient to do Apple because you just do the iCloud. And I've already got all my devices on Apple. So I've sunk all my investment into that.
And you're probably paying for storage, right, for the photos?
Yeah, I'm paying for storage for the photos.
Yep. Yeah, and it's like, like if you're on a social media and you start getting more followers, then that makes you wouldn't want to leave that because you have all these followers.
Right.
And you have your reputation. As your reputation goes up, then you wouldn't want to leave because of that. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of ways to do that with some other type of product. If you're just obviously reputation is huge, I think, in a regular shop or like a brick and mortar business, like a mechanic. Eventually, you build up reputation. The longer someone works with you, then that's going to keep them hooked. But
think about like loyalty programs that you buy something and then you get a coupon after you buy it that says you can come in this range of dates to get 25% off another item. And then the cycle keeps repeating itself, and you end up going and buying more than you ever intended because of the loyalty discount.
Yeah, so if you can have all those things in place, you can create something, a product or a service that will keep people hooked for the long term, and you'll have a high lifetime value for your customers.
This happened to me during tax season because the first service I used to file my taxes was TurboTax, and I got all the way down to the very last few button clicks when they said, oh, by the way, you have this kind of investment form you need, which we don't supply with your personal account that you have for free. You're going to have to pay $45 for this form. I'm like, give me a break. That's like all of the refund I was going to get on this one account or on my federal this year. I was like, no way, you're going to make me do this? And I'm like, I'm going somewhere else. But the trouble was I had put all my information in there, and now I had to go do it all over again somewhere else where that did not have the fee. And it just took a lot longer. And that's the thing. They make you go through all that stuff to find out later, oh, by the way, there's a fee. But that's where they catch you.
Exactly. Once you've invested time into something, you don't want to stop. And sometimes you need to because people do the wrong thing for so long, but they have so much invested in it, it's very hard to just give up everything you've put into it, even though you need to switch and try something else.
Right.
Yeah.
So we hope you enjoyed this book, Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products. And if you did, it would be awesome if you clicked subscribe and started your own trigger, because by clicking subscribe, we externally encouraged you to create a trigger, which makes you take an action. You get a variable reward. You never know how good the episode will be every week. Then you invest yourself in the app with the time you listen to us, and then you get an internal trigger every time the episode pops up every week. So it's great. It's a win-win.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Why not? Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, guys. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.